This is a Baseball Tonight podcast for Monday, August 24th, 2026, presented by La Quinta by Wyndham. Kenny Legan is producing for Back in Connecticut. I'm Buster Olney, working from my hotel in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where on Sunday, the Little League Classic was held. And of course, a big part of that was the interactions between the Little Leaguers and the Major Leaguers who came into town. At about 11:30, the Milwaukee Brewers plane landed. And then those players hung out with the Little Leaguers. And about an hour after that, the Atlanta Braves plane landed. And there was so much fun stuff. D.L. Hall, the reliever from the Milwaukee Brewers, was doing Google Translate with a team from the Far East. Ozzie Albies, the second baseman for the Atlanta Braves, hanging out with the team from his homeland, Curacao, enjoying his time with them. But there's no question. The star of the day was Jacob Misiorowski, who was just surrounded by hordes of kids everywhere he went. Everyone asked him to sign autographs. I talked to Miz after he went through that, and I asked him, I said, how many autographs would you guess you signed? And he just shook his head. He goes, hundreds. It was amazing, the kid's response to this superhero, because, of course, he throws the ball harder than anybody else. He was signing, he mentioned to me 3 Pokemon cards along the way. I asked him if any of the kids asked an interesting question to him, and his response was, no, I heard a lot of screaming. He was, I think Todd Frazier put it, that he was like the 5th Beatle among the Little Leaguers, which is not a surprise because of his preeminence in the sport. Now, these two teams are playing last night. What was an important game because both teams are, trying to maintain their seeding in the National League, or, in the Braves' case, to improve their seeding. And the Braves, behind Tyler Mahle, win 4-2 in the 9th inning. Michael Harris got a big hit for Atlanta.
Harris, right field. The wall's 12 feet. It's over that wall. A home run for Money Mike. And the Braves get a 4-2 lead here in the 9th. A little insurance.
In the late innings, what I absolutely loved seeing was all the love that was extended to our colleague Karl Ravech, who was doing his last Major League game this year for ESPN. Garrett Mitchell actually got it started early in the game when he was on the microphone from the outfield, and as he ran off the field, he thanked Karl for all of his time in baseball and for his voice in baseball, and that was really nice. Karl was quite touched by that. In the 6th inning, Chris Sale was in the booth with those guys, with Eduardo and with Karl, and then he talked about Karl and how much Karl has meant. Eduardo Perez took some time to do that. I mentioned, all the people around baseball that have reached out to me, asking about Karl. Sending best wishes to Karl, and a really great gesture by the Atlanta Braves general manager, Alex Anthopoulos. He asked that the Braves lineup card be set aside and signed by all the Braves players, and that's going to be presented to Karl down the road. I know from talking with Karl afterward, he was really moved by that gesture. Now, Atlanta trying to win the National League East, they win the game. Earlier in the day, Philadelphia came back from a 4-0 deficit, scoring 6 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning. This is how it ended.
O'Brien is ready, and the 2-2 pitch. Swing and a fly ball. Center field, it's got a chance. Church back, out of room! Yes! And it's over! Yeah! It's over! Kyle Schwarber with a walk-off home run into the hedges in dead center field. And the Phillies have absolutely stunned the Cardinals 6-4 with 6 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning.
So at the end of the day, the Phillies, 3 games behind Atlanta in the National League East. The Royals won their 8th straight game, and we'll be talking with Eric Hosmer about that, among many other topics, including the situation with Ketel Marte and the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that crazy race for the 3rd American League wildcard. As of Monday morning, the Astros and Rangers are tied for first place in the American League West with identical 65 and 66 records, and 7 teams are within 3.5 games of that 3rd wild card in the American League. In Boston, the Red Sox swept the Giants. Nick Sogard got a big hit.
Sogard didn't challenge, and so he deposits a ball
out of here over the Green Monster. He could have had a walk. He'll take a trot instead. It's 3-1.
Let's get to it. Eric Hosmer is a World Series champion. He also is a broadcaster. You hear him all over the place. Hos, how you doing?
Doing great, Buster. Glad to be on. Great time of year to talk ball.
Yeah, I'm in Williamsport, Pennsylvania as we speak and getting ready. You and I are talking midday on Sunday before the Little League Classic. You got to be at this event when you were with the Boston Red Sox. What was it like for you coming back in and dropping in among all these crazy kids?
Oh man, I tell you what, it's a fun event. It's a bucket list type of event for a baseball guy. We're in Baltimore the last day of the series. We got up about 8 o'clock, took a bus, flew into Williamsport. We were greeted by everybody, the kids, the families, everyone from Little League. As soon as we got there, on the runway, walked down the plane, and then we bussed right into Williamsport. And being able to experience, you're just driving through a neighborhood, and all of a sudden just like this magical baseball world just pops out. So I've always gotten to watch as a kid, Williamsport, the Little League. I remember I was jealous of the other 12-year-olds during my years, but to be able to go walk through and just experience it for a day and then get to see the kids on the back end enjoy a big league game, it was a fun day, a full day experience.
I was just speaking with an executive before I jumped on with you with the team, and he has not been here. And I said to him that my sense was, after doing this year after year after year, was that for the players, it was great fun, and it was a great change-up over the course of the season. Sometimes, when I've covered some of these style of games where they drop in, one-off in the middle of a schedule, it can be a little bit onerous for the players, the travel and for one game and that thing. But my sense of players is that they come here and it's almost like, first off, in the dog days of August, this great reminder of why they fell in love with baseball in the first place.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, Buster. This is nitpicking at its finest. So throughout the course of a major league season, it can get repetitive for these guys. It's almost like it feels like it goes night game, day game, and you're showing up to the field.
Right?
Absolutely. You're showing up to the field, you're doing your video work, you're doing your routine, training room, weight room, all of that. So to be able to mix it up, go to the Little League World Series in Williamsport and get to talk to these young kids, and it's refreshing. You get to hear some of these kids and the questions they ask. It kind of refreshes your mentality, your mindset as a player, and it gets you thinking like a kid again, and it just takes you back and kind of takes you out of this crazy major league season you're going through, slows everything down. The perspective you have there, getting to spend the full day with those kids is just so fun. And, I'm getting to look at the matchup this year, and I'm like, man, is Miz pitching? If not, maybe he can throw a bullpen in front of all those kids. Like, it's such a cool experience for those kids, no matter what you're talking about, watching baseball or just hanging out with those guys.
Yeah, when the Yankees were here for this, to watch the Little Leaguers react to Aaron Judge, who looks like a giant, and they're around him. And I'm thinking that, and again, you and I are talking mid-afternoon on Sunday before we actually see how this plays out. Jacob Misiorowski has to be like the ultimate superhero for a lot of these kids because he throws harder than any starting pitcher that we've ever seen, and he collects Pokemon cards.
Yeah, they're all into the same hobbies. And again, they're picking Jacob Misiorowski on every video game. They're following him on Twitter. They're following him on X, YouTube, everything they can, because not only do they want to be this guy on the baseball field, but off the field as well. They're into all the same hobbies. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, from the fun of Williamsport to the not so much fun with the Arizona Diamondbacks, Ketel Marte was expected to be in a lineup in a game against the Red Sox last week. He didn't show up to the park for a time. The Diamondbacks weren't sure exactly where he was. He was scratched 15 minutes before the game. Subsequently, he's flown back to Phoenix. He goes on the injured list, and then on another night while the team is playing, there's video of him in a casino. And my sense is that, and watching the interviews with Torey Lovullo and obviously reading up, I'm not around the team on a daily basis, but man, these guys are bending over backwards to not let the situation blow up in the middle of a pennant race. What are you seeing?
Seeing a lot. Again, not there every day, so just kind of from afar, just kind of collecting information and trying to put the pieces together of thinking what's happening from afar. And when I see this, Torey Lovullo is a manager that's respected amongst players. He's respected amongst everybody throughout baseball. And, Ketel Marte as well. When this guy is a 10-year-plus veteran and he's a guy that's signed there long-term, I would imagine that Torey Lovullo and Ketel have had great communication up until this point. And now when I'm watching Torrey speak to the media, it seems like that communication is starting to get a little edgy now. It's starting to feel that, that's breaking, that trust that they have amongst each other is breaking a little bit. So, that's a situation where, Torrey puts a lot of accountability into his players, especially the leadership there. So I'm sure not only is this a distraction for a team in a key spot right now in a pennant race, they're trying to figure out a wild card spot, a game out, but this is a situation now where, I feel like Torrey trusted Ketel to go do what he had to do off the field, take care of some business, and get back here as quick as possible. And to hear that Ketel was out doing some things that, probably shouldn't have been doing right now at this time of year, it's tough to hear. It's tough to hear for not only Torrey, but those players in that clubhouse, because they look up to Ketel in more than one way. And at this time of year, they're 1-2 games out of the wild card. That's the last thing you want to be talking about with 30, 40 games down the stretch to go.
All right, you were a clubhouse leader, and I won't ask you specifically what you would do in this situation, but generally speaking, when you have a situation like this, what's the reflex? The go-to, again, you're in a pennant race. As you and I talked, they start the day 2 games out of the third wild card in the National League, and every game matters.
Yeah, and I think, again, I learned a lot from Torrey. I learned a lot from Torey Lovullo when he speaks to the media, when he speaks at his press conferences, and, he's never going to give up on the human being, and I think that's first and foremost. But at the same time now, if, we're not communicating and the trust levels aren't there, we're not being all the way truthful to each other, he's obligated to 25, 26 other guys on that roster, everybody in that building, to try and make a playoff spot, that fan base, everybody. So I think it sounds like Torrey, again, is always going to be there for Ketel off the field. But on the field, these guys got to close that chapter, and they got to figure out, 30, 40 games, how are we going to get in this playoff race, in this wild card spot? So it feels like they're moving on baseball-wise, but they're never going to move on from the human.
So the other day, we had a conversation with A.J. Hinch before we did the Tigers and the Pirates broadcast. And, I asked A.J. about his message to the team after the Tigers traded away Skubal and Casey Mize. And he said he opened up the conversation by saying, we're still in this thing. And I know that because if we weren't in this thing, more of you guys would have been traded. And he described what he did. And I was like, man, that is some Tony Robbins stuff right there. Like, to find that way to handle it. And look, I'm, for this thing from an athlete, but I kind of wonder if Torrey is also working like crazy, thinking about how he can thread this needle, because in this situation, you have to maintain credibility. As you said, you're taking care of the other guys on the team, and at the same time, they're watching your public comments about the situation.
Yeah, and that's where we can learn so much from Torey Lovullo, A.J. Hinch, those managers, because guys that have been around the game for a long time but are doing so well at adapting to not only the new age player and the mindset and the ability to connect with these guys, but understanding the reality of what these young players are going through as well. And social media, the information is out there instantly, and it's not but big market, small market, everybody knows, everybody finds out. So the way that they're able to balance that is really, really something we can all learn from. I remember, Buster, when we were there right around Mother's Day for the Tigers and the Royals, A.J. Hinch, we were already asking him the question, and he was beating those questions, basically beating the media and beating his players. So basically saying, listen, players, well, this is going to happen. If we go 3-4 games where we, lose, have a rough stretch, the media is going to talk about Tarek possibly leaving. So he's already putting that plan, he's planting that seed in his players' minds, saying this is going to be the chatter. We're going to be prepared for when it comes. Not all of a sudden, boom, these guys are seeing the headlines on TV. Do I mention it? Do I not address it? He beat it. He got to the forefront of it. And I think that's experience from what he told us. And that's what we can learn a lot from AJ and Torey Lovullo as well.
And I'll give you another example of this sort of thing. So Aaron Boone gets a lot of criticism on New York Talk Radio because the host absolutely want him to bury players. Like, a guy has a bad game, he makes a mental mistake, that sort of thing. And there's that instinct of, say this guy stinks. And first off, that's not Aaron's nature. Like, he's going to go glass half full because that's who he is. But also, what purpose does that serve, Haas? Like, if you're Torey Lovullo right now, there's no point. Even if, let's say privately, he's hanging out with Mike Hazen, the general manager, and he's like, I can't believe what this guy did. I don't understand it. I'm really mad. It does him no good to bury the guy publicly, right?
No, and again, if you feel like if a manager of that experience and that level ever buries a guy publicly, that it's gotten to the fifth or sixth time where they've just tried
Right.
everything they can and the message isn't getting there. But that's one of the things you mentioned, Boone, Aaron Boone, I really admire about Boone is, man, he's in New York. I mean, that's the toughest market of all. And the way he's able, to take those quote unquote bullets for his players and, he's not afraid of his resume. He's not afraid of who he is as a baseball manager, as a coach to, be able to have the confidence and the ability to take on that heat from the media. And, every time you talk or I talk to a player and they talk about the Yankees, you ask how it is, you ask how Boone is, and they're always like, man, it feels like, with all the heat we get, it brings us together as players. It brings our clubhouse together. And that starts with Boone first and foremost, because his ability to take on the media, to be willing to take criticism for the players and take the heat off the players. I think that's something that goes a long way, especially in New York. And I think Boone's understanding of that market and feel of the professionalism of the game to understand, hey, I'm going to take the pressure off the players in this way and let them perform and let those guys grow together. I think it's something that he does very, very well. And again, you have to have a certain level of confidence in yourself to be willing to take on this media beast in New York and the Northeast here.
Along these lines, and we're talking about managers and managing the media. In one of our recent broadcasts, we had the Yankees, and this is after George Lombard comes up and Jr. and he's making plays like every day. And I asked him to assess George Lombard Jr. after, a week in the big leagues. What are you seeing so far? And he kind of gives me this small smile, and then he gave a very moderate very moderate endorsement of how well George Lombard Jr. was playing. And I walked away from that interview, see if you agree with me on this. And there were two things that I think he was doing. One, he's like, I am not going to build this up expectations of how good this, this guy looks. And two, he knows Anthony Volpe's listening. He knows Anthony Volpe's sitting in the minor leagues and could potentially translate every bit of compliment for George Lombard Jr. into a criticism of him. Does that make sense?
It completely does. He's balancing that situation. He's not putting too much pressure on his young superstar. He's not putting this crazy expectation out there for the media to build off of. And he understands his young players see everything nowadays. They're on social media. They're going to see this stuff. And then at the same time with Volpe, Volpe can be a valuable piece for them at some point in time, whether that's off the bench, whether that's down here in September, winning a game, filling in for somebody. So, you always want to have the guy buying in, and the mentality of a player goes a long way. So, again, even if, Volpe isn't in the plans off the bench that way, I think the feel of Aaron Boone understanding, I'm still going to build this guy up any way I can, that goes a long way for the players. And, George Lombard Jr., man, he is a game changer in every which way.
Yeah.
If he can just we're just watching him using the challenge system at the plate. I've seen him overturn calls in back-to-back situations. He draws the walk, gets on first. He can score first to home and a ball in the gap. Defensively, what he does, he's got power. He's a game changer, and I think that's a breath of fresh air for Yankee fans and that whole organization to see.
Yeah, I think that if George Lombard Jr. was in a small market and I asked Boone the same question, I think he would go, this guy looks unbelievable. Like, he looks great, and he would show that excitement. But being in New York, I think he's like, I don't want to put heap stuff on this kid when he's so young. All right, speaking of a young player, a lot of expectation. Kade Anderson made his debut for the Seattle Mariners. He was having an excellent outing, 5 2/3, 1 run, and then allows a couple of home runs on back-to-back pitches. But I think in a crazy American League wildcard race, who knows, maybe he's a difference maker. What are you seeing?
Man, I see like a blend of Kershaw and Cole Hamels in a way. The delivery and that big 12-6 curveball, obviously that screams Kershaw night and day. And the way that Anderson's able to use it, strike one. He able 8 out of 16 with that 12-6 curveball. And then he can also get swing and miss. The whiff percentage, those Cubs hitters, he was able to put them away with it. His changeup at the same time is a put-away pitch to the right-handers. I see a lot of Cole Hamels in that, especially with the delivery. I think now what Kade Anderson's learning, especially what a good test to go up against the Chicago Cubs, a veteran lineup led by Alex Bregman, Ian Happ, those guys, super professional in their approach. He's going to learn, okay, these out pitches that I have, the curveball, I can use that as a weapon, strike one. The changeup, I got to locate. That was the pitch, the changeup and the slider that I gave up damage on. So these big league hitters, I have a plus changeup, but it's still at the same time, the location is key. So I think that stuff he's going to learn all throughout the big leagues in his beginning of his young career. But I mean, start one, what a way to learn and develop going up against those Cubs and creating that feedback, getting that information that he got in start one.
Yeah, and after he wins, and with obviously Randy Arozarena playing a huge role with that, homering on the first pitch that he saw, and then the walk-off home run later in the game, the Mariners are 2 games out in this 7-team race where the 7 teams are separated by 2.5 games. Do you have a strong feeling about any one of these teams? Because I can tell you, when I reach out to folks with other teams and ask them, they always come back to the same team. What about you?
Man, I mean, when you look at the rosters, the Mariners, they have such good pitching. And, you figure at some point in time that Cal Raleigh's going to get going and get hot at some stretch offensively. And then Texas, the AL, that West out there, Texas Rangers, you figure with Skip Shoemaker and all those, front office CY, the guys that I've known, I believe in those guys, that veteran staff and players. I think they're a team that can sneak up there in the wild card race as well. But it's just wide open. It really is wide open, the whole American League. I mean, you said it early on. I feel like 10 times ago when we recorded, Buster, it's the land of opportunity, American League. Not only the American League, but the American League West. So I've stuck with Texas coming out of there. I'm going to stick with them, and I think they find a way. But that last wild card spot, I still feel like Toronto. I've never given up on them. So that's another team that Toronto, I just feel like they can play the game. They can play baseball, so I can never give up on them.
And they've had success recently in the postseason, like that group of players, they know how to navigate that. If in fact, and Paul Hembekides discussed this the other day on the podcast, if in fact the third wild card in the American League gets into the postseason with a record under 500, that would be the first time in Major League history that happened in a full season, which is just absolutely bonkers. All right, who do you have? Shohei Ohtani versus Pete Crow Armstrong, a conversation that we're going to have about the National League MVP race down the stretch.
Man, and it could be a conversation that leads to a further conversation because at this point, I mean, what Pete Crow Armstrong is doing in Chicago, I mean, the leadoff homer after leadoff homer, the walk-offs, the big hits, the storyline, I understand. I get it. I mean, he is unbelievable on both sides of the ball in center field. And Shohei Ohtani, I mean, what he's doing on the mound, what he's doing just year in and year out, it almost feels like that, voters will have that voter fatigue, so to speak, if the numbers are kind of similar to each other. So at this point, it's like, do we need another award because of what Shohei Ohtani is doing on the mound is just that much, it's that different than what any other player is doing. So it is the hardest question to answer right now as far as who would you name the MVP if the season ended today, because we truly need another month and a half for this to play out. The only thing now that I fear for PCA is if Shohei Ohtani gets back on the mound and has 2 or 3 quality starts, it's going to be hard to give it to anybody else but Shohei. But man, has Pete Crow Armstrong been exciting to watch. And I feel like a couple times now I've brought up that Shohei Ohtani on a couple different outlets kind of should be the MVP if it ended today just because he's a pitcher. But I feel like that's disrespecting Pete Crow Armstrong and PCA and what he's done. It's been so fun to watch. So it's truly a question I can't answer at this point.
Okay, yeah, and we do have 6 more weeks or 5.5 more weeks to gather information. Shohei Ohtani on Saturday through 30 pitches in a live BP session. He's going to do one more live session throwing to hitters, and then he could be back in the first week of September. You would assume if he sticks to his past schedule of pitching once a week, he could probably build up to 5 innings by the time we get to the postseason. And as you said, he could have some of those starts. He'll go over 100 innings, and he has a 1.79 ERA. And if you're the Dodgers now, you're lining up Tarek Skubal and Blake Snell and Yamamoto, and Shohei Ohtani is building up to be the number 5. You might have Glasnow and Sasaki sliding to the bullpen. It's part of the reason why last week Tim and I were like, yeah, the Edwin Diaz thing at the closer, not that big of a deal. What do you think?
No, and it's going to be, if anybody, Dave Roberts is obviously a Hall of Fame manager at this point. He's well on his way to Cooperstown. And if anybody out there has brought up the argument of, anybody can do the Dodgers, manage that roster and win with that team, whatever, he's been tested this year, and I think he's going to continue to be tested in a lot of ways as a manager. We've already seen him challenge his team publicly, try to wake them up through the media, through his press conferences. And then at the same time now, with Edwin Diaz, like you mentioned, being shaky in that ninth inning, I think Dave Roberts is going to have a really interesting case here or mystery to solve with his pitching. And mystery is, there's a plethora of starting pitchers over there on that Dodger staff. How is he going to use these guys? How is he going to, is he going to piggyback a Blake Snell and a Shohei Ohtani? Is he going to use Ohtani as a closer? Is he going to use him in that bridge roll out of the bullpen? It's going to be very interesting to see how Dave Roberts uses all these pitchers because, he's got 7, 9 quality starting pitchers. You don't know if he's going to use Blake Snell, Yamamoto to just ride out and get creative with the other guys. So that's the one thing that I'm really interested to see is how Dave Roberts and that Dodgers pitching staff, coaches that is, use their pitchers and use these starters and how they get creative in the bullpen.
All right, you've been traded midseason. I'm curious to see if you felt the same way I did. When Skubal was traded to the Dodgers, it didn't surprise me that it was a bit of a struggle at first because when I covered the Yankees when they got Roger Clemens in 1999, and he'd won back-to-back Cy Young awards with the Toronto Blue Jays in the conversation 97 and 98. And the conversation around baseball was the same. Oh, my God, when the Yankees get Clemens to go along with David Cohn and Andy Pettitte and El Duque, Orlando Hernandez, they're unbeatable. And Roger kind of struggled in that first year to get comfortable because he was surrounded by all these guys who had accomplished so much together. And it was a different type of pressure, if that makes sense. And in the postseason that first year, Roger was the number 4 starter. And then in year 2, he was much more comfortable. And he went back to being the dominant, Hall of Fame caliber pitcher that he was throughout most of his career. And so it doesn't surprise me that Skubal, tell me what that's like to go from one team to another, especially when you're talking about a Dodger team that's had so much success.
Yeah, it's different. It's different, especially, I think automatically of Adley Rutschman as a catcher going over there. To me,
Right?
that's the hardest because you got to get on the same page with the pitchers, the starters, the bullpen. And then the second hardest is that starting pitcher, a guy like Skubal, because all this is happening on the fly. Tarek Skubal won 2 Cy Young awards back-to-back in Detroit, but that's all he's ever known in his big league life is showing up, going through that same routine for 6, 7 straight years. And then now, mid-season, that's all changing on the fly. You're trying to buy in with your new teammates. A lot of these old soul school type pitchers don't like shaking off their catchers. So to go to a new team, you want to buy in to not only, the staff, but your coaches or your players as well. So he's going over there probably not wanting to shake off his catchers much. So it's a little bit of an adjustment period. It really is. Not only that, to on the fly, you're moving, your family's moving, you're dealing with stuff off the field. So, don't get me wrong. It gets that player off of that just, everyday routine and it throws them off just that little bit. And then on the flip side, you have the other guys on the other team, the other 9 hitters that understand what's happening here. And they're going to use that as aggressiveness. They're going to use that for something to feed and build off of as a team and understand that Skubal might be out of his comfort zone. So again, this is all kind of falling on Dave Roberts' plate here when you put Yamamoto, what he did for you last year, Blake Snell, the resume of Tarek Skubal. How is he going to balance all this? There's going to be some feelings hurt, whether or not guys don't go game 1 or game 2, or if guys got to go slide to the bullpen, possibly piggyback somebody. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, and Skubal built that Cy Young resume sort of anonymously, if that makes sense, right? Playing in Detroit at the time he started to build up, they weren't necessarily a very good team. I can remember 2 years ago this weekend, Little League Classic weekend, A.J. Hinch lined up Skubal to pitch in this very game in Williamsport because he wanted to give him the national platform. Well, 2 years later, he gets traded to the Dodgers, and he's the guy. He's in the conversation for the best pitcher on the planet. Very different circumstances, something he's going to have to deal with going forward. 2 more for you. The Yankees have suffered a number of injuries now. Giancarlo Stanton with a calf injury. It's an open question as whether or not he's going to play the rest of the year. Max Fried has a bone bruise in his pitching elbow. He says it's not that big of a deal. He thinks he's going to come back. Ryan Weathers going down with an elbow injury from the start a couple days ago. This is obviously a concern. I thought the Yankees had some margin for error with the depth on their roster, but man, it's being tested. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's 2 big blows for the Yankees. The Yankees got out to a good start early on, so they, created a little window, a margin of error for themselves. And it feels like with Stanton, the understanding was let's get him healthy because we know how valuable he can be in the postseason, how hot he gets, how just good of an at-bat he puts every October. We've seen it year in and year out. Max Fried, same thing. I think you understand when you sign Max Fried, you're signing him to win a World Series, and they've built that lead in the regular season, so we need him ready to go in October, match up with Garrett Cole, Schlittler, Rodon, all those guys. So those are big blows if those guys can't get back for October baseball. And then, Ryan Weathers, on the other hand, is a little different. He came on, was having a career year, picked up some big starts for the Yankees, some quality innings for them, and it was kind of understanding he was going to have to go to the bullpen at some point in time to get ready for the postseason and be a huge weapon, because he was going on a huge run as a starter, and that was going to be a tough move for Boone to make, but just with the roster and the guys they had, that would have had to happen. So tough blows for the Yankees, and especially with Weathers, to see how he went off the mound there. But the Yankees, man, they got to add to that offense. They need, first and foremost, Judge to be healthy, and then after that, they need the key pieces to fill in around him. So Stanton was one of those guys, and that's a big blow to not have him.
All right, last one. I know you're dying to talk about your Kansas City Royals, who are rolling. I love, and I really enjoyed this about the Toronto Blue Jays at the trade deadline. They sold off some pieces, but they also, with the addition of Soriano, they also clearly were beginning to position themselves for 2027, and I think that's what the Royals have done. They invested a lot of plate appearances in Jack Caglione in 2025, and early this year, even when he was struggling, they kept running him out there. Man, he's a force. And Noah Cameron making a major change by basically taking over his own pitch calling, and he's been lights out since then.
Yeah, JJ Piccolo, the Royals president, GM, all that. He was, very adamant and vocal at the trade deadline of saying, we're not going to blow this whole thing up. This year is not happening the way we want it to, but with Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, we still believe in those guys as starting pitchers. So we bounce back next year with them as the front line of our rotation. And now to see what Noah Cameron's done, I mean, he's made an adjustment, Buster. The last 4 or 5 outings, he's gone to the pitch comm, and he's calling his own pitches now. He's working a quick pace, quick tempo, throwing the cutter to righties. I mean, he's working fast. He's gone 8 innings, 9 innings. It seems like 4 to 5 starts, and it's fun. It's been really, really fun to watch. So to see Noah Cameron come along, you're understanding now why JJ is believing in this roster. Now, with that pitching staff, you get Maikel Garcia healthy. Vinny's back in the lineup. They just rolled 7 in a row, and you can understand now why JJ's mindset is, this year was kind of a fluke year. We're going to hold on to these pitchers, and we're going to bounce back next year and ride on this staff, these guys, and believe that we should be right where, we believe we'd be this year. And last guy too, Buster, I can't mention the pitching without mentioning Randy Dobnak. I mean, this kid, he has been unbelievable for the Royals. Just an old school, traditional sinker, 88 to 92 miles an hour, can run it up to 94 with a 4-seam, just pitching to contact. And man, it's been fun to watch. It's been a breath of fresh air. And he's taken the ball and earned innings. He's earned starts, and he's might have earned himself a spot on that team next year. It's been really cool.
So playing defense, did you prefer to play behind the guy who just nodded his head to the catcher? Mark Burley was like this. Chris Sale is generally like this. Or do you love the idea of the guy just saying, it's my game, I'm going to take control, I'm going to call the pitches?
I mean, you love nothing more than a quick pace, quick tempo, that Chris Sale, Mark Burley, like you're talking about. As a defender, I'm on my toes. I'm ready to go. I know it's going to come. I know there's action. If you're going to take your time and say, this is my game, sit back and enjoy the show, that I need you, rolling out back-to-back Cy Youngs like Tarek Skubal did, and then I'll sit back and enjoy the show. But if you're, taking your sweet time, rolling up a 4.5 or a 5 ERA up there, then we're going to have to change something about that, Buster. But I definitely enjoyed a Mark Burley-esque pace. There's nothing better than that as a defender.
All right, Haas. Well, thanks for doing this. Great to talk with you.
Appreciate you, Buster. Appreciate you guys.
All right, here, Bleacher Tweets on Monday. Kenny Ligon subbing in for Taylor. He's out on a nice family vacation for the week, so we got 3 episodes here with me, and I'm happy to be back in the fold. Our first Bleacher Tweet comes from Jim in North Dakota. Jim writes, "Hey, Buster. Fernando Tatis has had a sizzling month of August. He has over 1,000 OPS and has basically doubled his home run output from the entire season combined. What do you attribute his big surge to?"
Confidence. I mean, he reminded everybody of how difficult early in this year, how difficult baseball is. And dealing with failure is so difficult, right? And he went through that long stretch where everyone is wondering, has he lost it? Is this related to PEDs because he had been suspended early in his career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just was like, at some point, he's going to go back to being Fernando Tatis Jr., and he's an exciting player when he gets going like this. So you knew it was coming. You knew at some point he would revert to the back of the baseball card, and that's what we're seeing. It's part of the reason why the Padres are really kind of a scary team if you're the Atlanta Braves, you're the Chicago Cubs, and you might see him in the first round.
Yeah, I know you and Eduardo talked about that a little bit in the last pod, so that was cool to hear. And it's good to see Tatis back balling again. That game against the Mets that he had a couple days ago was really fun to watch as well. We got one from Doug from Connecticut. He asks, Buster, is your birth name Buster, or is that a nickname? And who is your favorite Buster besides yourself?
So it definitely is a nickname. 2 days before I was born, my great-grandfather passed away. His name was Captain Bassett. He was married to my grandmother. And so my mom was happy about me being born and sad about Captain Bassett passing. He always he always referred to little kids, because he couldn't remember the names, as Buster. And so my given name is Robert Stambrioli III. You can hear Mike Greenberg say that. And the other day, I was up in Lake George for a family vacation, and there's a cemetery up there, a private cemetery, with Robert Stambrioli II. He's buried there, and 2 headstones away is Captain Bassett. So the 2 people responsible for that name happening that way are there. And my favorite Buster, look, the only adult that I've ever met who's had that name was Buster Posey, the catcher. And I always enjoyed my interactions with him. But I got to say, my favorite Busters are the many, 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 many dogs and cats that I have met named Buster. And Buster Posey told me that there would be times he'd be walking out to warm up the pitcher before the game during his playing career, and someone would yell, "Hey, Buster, I named my dog after you." I've had that, 2 or 3 times. And actually, there were 2 cockatoos in the San Diego Zoo. The one was named Buster, and the other name was named Olney.
Oh, it's a tremendous stories. Thanks for sharing a little bit of that. I love the dogs and cats. Yeah, I've met a lot of good pets named Buster as well.
A lot. It's a great name for pets. Little kids like that name.
It is. It's tremendous. Well, it fits you well too. It's always you're my favorite Buster here on the pod. So,
well, thank you, Kenny.
Absolutely. Thanks for sending in the Bleacher Tweets. We'll take any baseball or non-baseball related questions. Always send them in bleachertweets@gmail.com.
And thanks for watching the Baseball Tonight podcast presented by La Quinta by Wyndham. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow you shine. And my thanks today to Deli, to Terrence, to Kenny. We'll thank Taylor, too, even though he's off on vacation. And my thanks to Eric Hosmer. Remember, hate and inequality based on skin color is something we need to fight against every single day.